Welcome back to the Tracy Take. Today, Ryan and I will be previewing the Seattle Seahawks 2021 season. And however, they don't have a first-round pick because they traded it away with New York Jets for Jamal Adams. We will still be talking about those in the 10th order in our recap season. But before we get into that, Ryan and I, we have a goal of getting to 400 subscribers by the Super Bowl weekend. Now, if I'm being frank, it does not look like we will make that, but any help will be greatly appreciated just to help us keep growing our community, keep growing all of our friends, because Ryan and I, we don't have any. That's why we started this thing. So subscribe to this channel, like this video. Oh, you have no friends. Come on. You're talking with me. I'm a loser. Look, I'm doing a handlebar mustache. That's how. Comment on this video, and Ryan, let's get into it.
Yeah. All right, let's do it.
So we want to say we told you so to the Seattle Seahawks fans. If you go back to our preview, we received a lot of comments and a lot of not so nice comments so nice, just people that disagreed with us on how we thought the Seattle Seahawks season went, and it kind of panned out the way that we said, Ryan, where Russell Wilson, and this is the stat we were talking about before. Think about this: Russell Wilson was under pressure for 37% of his dropbacks. So if they had a 3-and-out and all three passes were dropback passes, at least one of those plays, he was under pressure, which is absolutely insane. And that was just the root cause of this entire struggle on offense, reason why Russell Wilson is wanting to leave. And then there's a bunch of other things. But before we get into that, let's talk about what did go well for Seattle this season.
I might have to pass that one back to you. I'm really not sure. They didn't really protect Russell Wilson. Their run game wasn't that great. They had one of the worst pass defenses in the league at 31. Yeah. And I guess the one good thing that may have come from this is that they had a good red zone defense. They were 12th overall in total team defense. Mm-hmm. So that means that even though they gave up a lot of yards, they did hold teams to field goals a fair bit, considering the fact that they had the 31 ranked pass defense and I believe the 19th ranked run defense. Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe red zone defense. I guess that does come down to coaching, but I don't really have too many goods for the Seahawks.
Well, I will say on the caveat with that, you mentioned that the run game was bad, and I will say they didn't have a running back that played more than 11 games throughout the season. So Alex Collins had the most. He only had 411 yards with 2 touchdowns, but that's not the role he's supposed to be in. Chris Carson only played in 4 games, but at least during that 4 games he had 232 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, and then Rashad Penny played 10 games with 749 yards and 6 touchdowns, which is a solid. The big plus to me, or the thing that went well, and that they were still consistent on, is for how much pressure Russell Wilson was on. Was under. They still have one of the best receiving duos in the league with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf didn't make 1,000 yards. Shockingly, I think some of that was also due with Russell Wilson missing 3 games. Because he's one of their favorite. He is his favorite target. But also, I think he'd be any quarterback's favorite target. But outside of that, though, just seem to struggle, and it's nothing really against Russell Wilson or against the skilled players. I don't think it's their fault. I don't think it's even the offensive line's fault. I just think it is poor management decisions that have gone on, trading for Jamal Adams and giving up so much. And not that he has been solid, but he I don't think he was worth.
He's one of the worst coverage safeties.
I don't know if he's been. He clearly hasn't been worth the 2 draft picks, which has absolutely decimated their.
He's one of the worst coverage safeties in the league. Mm. And I get he's very good in the box and he's a very physical guy, but he is one of the worst coverage safeties in the league.
Yeah,
and so
I mean, he really was the only one that was kind of good on that defensive side. Well, I take that back. Carlos Dunlap having 8.5 sacks and Quandre Diggs having 5 picks. I hope Quandre Diggs makes a quick recovery. We all know about the injury, and I hope he makes a quick recovery because he's going into his free agent season. But there's a lot of guys that are hitting free agent too, which is kind of concerned, especially starting with the offensive line. Duane Brown, their left tackle, who's been there for a long time. He's going to be 36 or 37, and he just had his worst season. He's hitting free agency. Brandon Shell, who was a right tackle, only had a 67.6 PFF grade. Ethan Pocic, who was their center this year, is also hitting. So that's three key pieces right there on the offensive line.
Yeah.
And then also Quandre Diggs, as I mentioned, and then Gerald Everett are the main ones. Same with Rashad Penny. And also Rashawn Green, who had a solid season at 6.5 sacks. Actually, I would say that's a pretty good season for him. But I think some of it has to do with coaching. I think some of it has to do with just the personnel that's on the field.
And Russell Wilson getting hurt obviously doesn't help.
But he didn't miss that much time. I mean, even during that.
What did he miss? 3 weeks?
3 weeks. Yeah. So he didn't miss that much.
I'm sure they lost all 3 of those games.
No, they beat Jacksonville. Geno Smith beat Jacksonville during that. So, but especially then where you look at the division that they're in with the NFC West, like the Rams aren't going away anytime soon. The 49ers, I think, are only going to get better. And the Cardinals should be better. If they figure their shit out, the Cardinals could be really good. But I think that's another one similar to the Seahawks. I think some management issues might take place. But what do the Seahawks, do you think, have to do to kind of improve? So they don't have a first-round pick. They're picking 41st overall in this year's draft. What do you think they have to do in the offseason, also in the draft, to
Well, okay, so I guess I'm going to come back to you with a question. But do you think that this team can regroup enough this offseason to come back and compete with Russell Wilson?
No. They have too many weaknesses especially in the secondary. I mean, like, they have to address the offensive line, because if your quarterback's being pressured over a third of the time, that's just going to have a huge impact on your success on the offensive side of the ball. And then when your secondary is so bad, like 31st over, averaging 265.5 yards per game, that is going to be super hard to overcome, especially then when you're in a division with the Los Angeles Rams, who now, if they keep Odell Beckham,
3 of the highest powered offenses in the league.
Because then the LA Rams. Then you have the Cardinals when DeAndre Hopkins comes back. Who knows what's going to happen? And then Kyle Shanahan, probably one of the best offensive minds in the league right now, and how he can scheme up. So they have such huge weaknesses with that offensive line, and then also in their pass game as well, where you might be able to overcome one, like how we're seeing the Bengals do with a weak offensive line, but then they're able to get the ball out of Joe Burrow's hand quick. With Russell Wilson, with the Seahawks though, and how it's on both sides of the ball, I don't see how they're going to be able to do that, which is a shame too, because maybe you could, if you just go through straight rebuild, trade Russell Wilson, trade DK Metcalf, and then just start rebuilding from there, because you could get a lot of picks from those guys and start building back up.
Yeah, and so that's my thing is, like, they're not in a situation, I think, that they can just, like, add a few guys here and there, and then all of a sudden, bada boom, like they're the Seahawks again. They got to add at least 2 quality offensive linemen. They got to totally revamp this defense, because honestly, like, this defense might get worse depending on if they lose people in free agency, and don't bring people in. And so I think it's time for them to rebuild. I'm not sure if Pete Carroll, I know there's a lot of rumors swirling around about him possibly leaving, but I think it's time for them to just accumulate draft picks and just start a rebuild. I know that there are a lot of teams, especially in a weak quarterback class, the trade price for Russell Wilson is going to go way up. Houston is another team that might be able to take advantage of that with Deshaun Watson. But I think it's time for them to rebuild. They got to strip it down to the studs and start over.
Yeah, I think so as well. So if they go that route, who do you think would be the first person to get traded?
Oh, Russell Wilson.
You think so?
Yeah, because I mean, look, you could get Denver is a place that I think they would give up their next 3 first-round picks tomorrow, I think, to get a player like Russell Wilson.
For how long? Yeah, that's fair.
Because he's going to be there for 10 years.
Well, he's already 32. He's already 32.
Maybe not 10 years, but you're going to get him for 8. Let's say 8. Let's say he plays till he's 40. You can still utilize like draft picks, and I think you have enough players that you will be able to outlast the loss in draft capital with guys like Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, Bradley Chubb, and then you have Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Noah Fant. I think that is the way to go. You got to do that, and then they have to hit on their draft picks. Last year they only had 3. They only brought in 3 rookies because they had traded all of their other picks away.
And I don't think any of those guys. Dwayne Eskridge, their second-round pick, didn't do anything. Trey Brown, that I know of, I didn't see him too much in the stat sheet. And then they had drafted an offensive tackle, which I don't think was used. It was Stone Forsythe was his name.
Yeah, Stone Forsythe. And they just haven't drafted well, and then that's why they've traded for guys like Duane Brown and Jamal Adams. And Duane Brown has been their best player, but even now, I mean, he's 36. He's kind of turning into Jason Peters, where he's like, he's only going to be as good as his age. Yeah. So I think it's time for them to start over. And I know that's tough for a Seattle team that's very prideful or a Seattle City that's very prideful in their football team, but I don't see any point in them keeping Russell Wilson around in the waning years of his career, just to have him go 9-7 every year.
Well, and so I'll say just another quick one where I already mentioned his name, but I could also see DK Metcalf going just because of how young he is. And he's arguably one of the best receivers in the league just with how explosive he is. Yeah. I'm looking at a team that's in the middle of the round that would need a receiver anyways and would maybe trade a couple of picks for him as well. I'm looking at Cleveland Browns. Seahawks could then be in the 13th pick, and then they'd be able to address the offensive line or the secondary with that pick because there's going to be a lot of players that are there. Now, it would take a couple other picks, and the Browns would also need to be interested as well. But I agree with you. I just think just where the team is at and where its division rivals are at, the Seahawks I think are just so far behind, and they would just be slowly dying into what is eventually going to come a couple years down the road if they just hang on to all these guys.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it might be better just to rip the Band-Aid off and just do it now. And I guess out of respect for Russell Wilson, let him kind of go and finish out his career in a place like Denver that he can actually have a possibility of winning in. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news for Seahawks fans, but I hope they kind of realize this already. Granted, based on their comments after our preseason, after our season preview, they probably have.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really have too much else on the Seahawks. I think it is time for them to rebuild, but I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the Tracy Take. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe and leave a comment down below on what you think the Seahawks should do. Let us know how wrong you think we are about the Seahawks having to rebuild, and we will laugh at you later. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next time.